Hey, Jacqueline, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Hi, Brian. Yes. So I'm here in the UK. I'm based in London and I've been in sales. I guess the real answer is I've probably been in sales since I was a little child because my parents have a retail store. And so really from early years, I was sort of in the store and helping with sales behind the counter. But I mean, my real sales career started after I finished university. I went to read.co.uk, an online recruitment advertising company, and then went into software sales. I saw all those job adverts about software sales, and I thought I really want to get into that industry, and worked for a company called Navex Global, which is a leader in ethics and compliance software, and then did a little stint as well in the Middle East, working for a company there. But I think my most recent career move over to Oracle into sort of HR technology is something that I'm just really excited about. It's the latest sort of step in my career, and lots of learnings along the way, which hopefully we can chat about today.
Yeah, because I got to think selling to HR would be pretty hard. Am I right or wrong? Or
Do you know, I've always done that though, because
have you?
recruitment is
Yeah.
selling to recruitment and HR. With ethics and compliance, it was more of the people ethics rather than some of the regulatory, but it was a lot around sort of the people behaviors and culture. So HR were often involved. And it's not easy to sell it to anyone these days,
It's
right?
not,
But
is it? It's pretty hard all around.
yeah, so
And well, let's talk about that journey. And, retail is one thing. People come to you. B2B is harder because, they've got their full-time job and we're kind of a side thing in a lot of cases. What's been working for you?
I think the journey that I've taken, which has been a really purposeful journey for me, I've really thought about every next step in my career. At the beginning, I kind of just fell into, okay, great, I got this sales job, and I wasn't really aware of all the different types of directions you could go in sales, the different types of sales jobs. What the reason I've gone the way that I have is because I've really looked for sales roles that need that strategic thinking, and you really have to get inside not only the individual contact's head, but understand the business, understand the consumers that they're selling to, or the businesses that they're selling to, the risks, so there's a lot to think about, which I really like.
And how do you go about that? Do you do a lot of research or what's your process?
Yeah, I think I am one of those people that it's sort of innate with me there. I like to know the facts. I like to research. I like to learn. And so that's why I thought this type of sales would be beneficial for me, because it's the sort of thing I like to do. There also there's a flip side to that, right? I can often that's one of the risks, is kind of learning too much and overthinking.
Digging too deep in the wrong
Yeah.
area.
So there's
And
always that risk.
how have you managed that? Or have you?
Yeah, it's something that it's been up and down, especially when
Yeah.
I've gone to a new role, because I think for a lot of people, when you move into a new industry, a new company, you want to get over that imposter syndrome. So you want to learn a lot. And so curbing that back a little bit, one of the things I'll often do is I'll practice. So if I've got a deal I'm working on, I do usually do extensive research, but I make sure there's a gap between, let's say, the meeting or the demo. I'm going to have a gap where I can just let it settle in for a day or two. I'm going to have another little briefing before the meeting, but I'll also practice before the meeting. So I'll practice some of the pitch or practice some of the questions that we might have to discuss. And I think, especially when it comes to difficult conversations, so the kind of inspiring ones and motivating ones are the easier ones for most people. But for me, especially, I know that I'm not someone who likes to give bad news or The confrontation is difficult. So when I know I have meetings like that, I remember I had one last year with it was with a customer who we had to talk through some difficult contractual misunderstandings. I videoed myself having that conversation because I wanted to make sure that I was very purposeful with the words I chose, and that also my kind of facial expression and gestures matched the sort of emotion I wanted to give off.
And was it effective?
And I think some of my colleagues were surprised to see that element of me because, they're used to seeing me in those inspirational meetings where I'm sort of high energy and, less. It was great for me. It did result in a positive outcome in the end, which was great. But it was a surprise to some people, I think.
And a lot of people don't really think that way. A lot of people, let's see how it goes. They assume they've been doing it for so many years that it'll just naturally happen. Yet
Yeah.
so many other professions aren't that way, right? There's always practice and rehearsal and getting feedback and game tapes and
Yes. Yeah. I think and I think it depends on and one of the revelations that has happened to me in the past sort of year or two is understanding how I am as a person, like how I behave and react and preparing for those situations, because I am not best at just seeing how it goes. Some people can do that really well, completely admire it. you know, I know that would be a vulnerability for me. So I do need to prepare. I do need to sometimes rehearse and practice.
And was that something that you had in your childhood or in college, either in the debating team or drama team or sports, where you had rehearsal, feedback, improvement?
Yes, I think I've had this. I do consider myself quite creative, whilst I don't think of myself as necessarily spontaneous and off the cuff. I do have a creative and artistic side, and like from a young age, I studied dance, and but we'd always rehearse, and I studied ballet, which is really quite a technical type of dance, right? And I realized, and I remember I went to a competition once where one of the categories was improv, and I was just terrible in it. I was embarrassed. It did not go well, and it was a life lesson for me. I'm not made for that.
But there is a lot of, sales, a lot of calls turn into like improv, right? Because we rehearse what we know and what we anticipate. But then that stranger comes into the meeting or some new event happens or some competitive thing pops up.
Yeah, I think, and I don't believe in scripted sales.
Right.
I definitely, if I'm going to if I'm going to do a demo or if I'm going to cold call someone, I'm not going to have a script there to read, but I'm going to make sure that I know some key points, and that it's almost like a safety net for me. So even if I don't use those, I guess it's one of those things that for me personally, I need that as a comfort to know that I can do my best job.
Give us a sense of like how many deals do you do a year? Is it like enterprise sales, I assume, where it's
so
10
yeah
maybe?
so not even that, I would say. Yeah, we're talking now at because they are enterprise wide. Often HR technology companies will really try not to replace it less than 5 years, and ideally longer if they can. So we would be looking at 4 or 5 deals a year. Yeah. So
they're pretty important.
They are, and that's why I was talking about getting to know not only the customer, the individual contact, the business, their world is really important.
But plus, I assume you're in a matrix where you're not the only person from the company conversing with the client.
Exactly. I mean, for anyone who's listening who knows Oracle, it is a giant of an organization. And one of the things I was actually hoping to talk about today was, I think, something I've learned in the past few years is really the importance of being a salesperson for yourself, selling yourself in a way, that personal brand, that credibility, so that people in the organization will help you, so that people will advocate for you, champion for you. So that's something that's really important to me as an individual as well, a sales individual.
And how do you do that? Because, because I participated in that at one time in my career. And there's like the end of the year, the enterprise license agreement, and everyone's trying to get their stuff on it. Everyone's trying to get introduced to the executive, and I'm sure you have like account managers and then, specialists and all these other areas. And everybody's got their own agenda.
Yes, yeah. Um, I think, one of the things that I'll do is I'll reach out proactively. So don't just reach out to
When you need something.
yeah, I mean, it's so transparent, right? And remember who's helped you out. When someone's helped you out, remember it. And to a point, I'll make a list. I'll make a list of, right, this person did X for me at this time. I'm going to remember that person so I can pay them back. But yeah, be proactive. I think that often helps people to open up a bit. Not everyone is going to, but it'll be more successful than I think you would believe at first.
And so you work well in that environment, or do you thrive in it? Some people thrive in it.
Well, at Oracle, I'm only 4 months in, so we're waiting to see the
well, let's see some results.
The fruits, yeah, the fruits of that. But I think it worked really well for me at my previous organization, because there was my immediate team, but actually reaching out to people beyond my team, and it was mostly colleagues in the US as well. So reaching out to people across, working in different geographies, different teams, different products. I think there's always something you can learn from people in the business as well. And that's something that I always try and do in my career, not only to, as I said, to hopefully build a network where they champion for you and advocate for you, but you can learn so much. And, that's one of the things that I'm doing now at Oracle, because in every organization, there's something you should be proud of where you're working. You should, and if you're not, there's probably other questions you should ask there. But every time in my career, I felt like I've been at the top in the top company that there is in that field. I'm selling their product. I believe in it. And so I should be speaking to the top people there, the brightest people at that organization.
And what differentiated you? Or maybe be easier to ask, how did you come about this strategy? Because most salespeople are kind of lone wolves. They've got their number, they're hyper-focused, they have to be, and they tend to work as a team only when they need to versus before in that preparation phase instead of that scramble and recovery phase.
I would say one of the elements that brought me to this is I want to enjoy my job. I want to enjoy my job. And I'm in my personal life, I'm not a lone wolf. I wouldn't say I'm a social butterfly, but I do enjoy connecting with people, meeting different people, talking, learning. And so it made sense to be thoughtful about that in my career, making sure that I was proactive about doing that. And yeah, as I say, I enjoy it. I think this is another thing that has probably come to me a little bit later in my career, where when I first started, I used to think that work is work and your home life is your home life. Work's not supposed to be that fun. It's supposed to, supposed to provide you with an income and food on the table. And I think as I've gotten older or more mature, I guess, I don't know which way it is, but life's kind of too short we spend so much time working. we have to find some enjoyment out of it. And especially now most of us are working from home,
Yeah.
that, distinguishing between those two worlds is an even finer line. So yeah, I just want to enjoy my job as well. I want to work with people I enjoy.
And what were some of the epiphanies that you learned along the way? Because you're doing kind of the hardest of the hard, large enterprise sales, and EMEA, where you got multiple cultures, styles, personalities,
Yeah.
languages.
Um, a couple of things really, because now I'm an individual contributor at the moment. In my last role, I was looking after a team, so I would definitely say one of the things that was an epiphany for me is looking after a team was realizing that you don't have to treat everyone fairly. Well, not the fairly, the same.
Equally. Yeah.
The same, not
Yeah.
fairly. No, the reason I said fairly is because that's actually something that is, in terms of my core personality, it's difficult for me to not treat people equally because I have this, I kind of get, I don't like things being unfair. So it was about unpicking that and learning, as I said before, learning what my core personality is like and how that reflects in my job. So learning that not everyone had to be treated the same. And I could spend, actually, I probably should spend 80% of my time with my top 20% of performers rather than the other way around. So that was definitely one of the epiphanies I had as a manager. And that came from reading First Break All the Rules by Gallup. So I read that book and that kind of brought that one. And the second one, there's been several other ones earlier in the career, but I think most recently I did a short course on process communication model. I'm not sure if you've come across that before, Brian, PCM.
No.
No, I'll just briefly explain it. It could be categorized as one of those sort of personality tests, like a Myers-Briggs, that type of thing. But it actually goes much more thorough into the breakdown of your layers of your personality, but also teaches you on how to recognize the layers of someone else's personality, because we're not all just one thing, right? We're not all just a red or a green or whatever colors they are. We're all a blend. So trying to work out the layers of different people's personalities and the triggers that will turn it into an uncomfortable conversation or have a customer ghost you. How do you identify those triggers quickly and sort of turn the conversation or communication into your favor in a positive way again?
So was that a real pivot point in your ability to, because when you're a leader, you're right, because all the reps have different styles, different experience levels, different motive levels.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly useful as a leader. I think it's also incredibly useful for your own self-awareness. I've mentioned a couple of times in this conversation about how I realized that's part of my kind of DNA in my personality. But the other thing is, I think it is really helpful in the sales process because I'm sure a lot of organizations will give the salespeople guidance on, the CIO's persona is this, the CFO's persona is this. I think those are really useful guides, but of course, not every CIO or CFO or HRD are the same. We all have our personalities. And so being able to layer the personality element into it really, and even to the sense that it should, if you can understand the preference in which people prefer for their communication, it's going to tailor whether you do a PowerPoint or an Excel spreadsheet, or if you do a 2-line email versus 20 lines and a picture in it, or, those sorts of things should be able to help you.
And how have you kind of read somebody? Because I guess the first step is to try and determine what personality type they are. Is that true?
It is, yeah. So I think we're very fortunate as salespeople that LinkedIn is a great tool for us in many ways. But if you have someone that does have an active profile on LinkedIn, well, if they don't, that also says a lot. But what you can do on LinkedIn is look at the types of comments they've made on other people's posts. Do they say things like, I love this, does it show that they're quite reactive? Do they, do they say things like, tell me how, tell me how you got to this place, or, are they quite directive in it? You can read a lot into the types of language that people use. And once you learn it, like I'm still in the learning process. I've only done a short course on it, but it's really helpful to help you understand people's drivers and motivators that are not just typical of their job persona.
Because too many of us think everyone else thinks identically to the way we think.
Yes, it is. And it's really hard to adapt to.
Sure is. It's the hardest.
Because I think, I'll give you an example. Some people really like, one in PCM, process communication model, one of the persona types talks about people who like to be active, to be doing engagement. And so one of the things that the course told me is that, well, you could try breaking the ice with like a joke. And I thought, a joke? I cannot speak to this customer with I'm not funny, one. I can't tell jokes. Also, this person, is of reasonable seniority in this, I think it was a finance organization. I was like, I'm not going to do this. And then I had this thought just before the meeting. I thought, oh, I'd recently learned something where they'd said, I was watching an online course about negotiation, and they talked about when you're learning something new, sometimes it's really uncomfortable at first. And so
Always,
I know listeners won't be able to see my hands at the moment, but if you hold your left hand out with your index finger out, and you just your index finger out, and your right hand with your thumb up, and then switch it, and then if you do it really quick, unless you've practice that's actually really uncomfortable. But after a while, it becomes much easier. And so I used that in part of the meeting, and it was bizarre. It just opened that person up, and it was unusual for me because I'd never done anything like that. But I think those are the sorts of things it can teach you.
So I take it you're naturally curious, or?
I am. Yeah. I was an annoying kid as a child. Why? But that is definitely one of the attributes that sort of drives me, and I think has helped me in my career.
And this curiosity about personality types and psychology, essentially, is that
Yes, yeah.
self-motivated, or was it something that the company exposed you to, or?
It was a self-motivated one. The company I was at had done a Discovery Insights, like a personality test, but I didn't just want to know about me. I wanted to know about others. Yeah. So I came across this model, process communication model, through my sister-in-law, and and then did about 8 hours on this course.
Wow.
and then just took it from there.
And clearly it's helpful.
It is. I would recommend it. Anyone who's sort of curious, wants to understand people, wants to understand themselves better, I think it's a really useful tool.
And how was that transition from rep to leader? Because that's usually hard at first. It's like the finger.
Yes. I think that's where the point I said earlier about how I do have this element where my baseline is that I do want to be nice to people, and to be, and to be fair and equal, and equal time to each person. So that transition from salesperson to leader, it was a big learning curve on some of that, and it was also one of the biggest jumps, I think, from anyone going from rep to leader is it's tough in terms of you're relying on other people's success to earn money. And that is really hard for a lot of salespeople because we're often control freaks, or we want to kind of hold on to everything. So that's really hard. But I think when you do get it, the reward is amazing. Not, the feeling of, oh my God, I've helped someone go from, A to B or A to Z even. And I remember there's a really good example last year where I worked with one of my team members who was relatively new. So had only, I was trying to practice that 80-20, right? Not spending too much time with him, just letting him get his feet. And, and so he hadn't done any huge deals, actually. He'd sort of done some smaller ones, more transactional, around sort of 10,000. And then I said, let's work together on a deal. We'll just shadow it end to end, and we'll talk about each step. So you can tell me what you think you should do, what we're going to do. I'll coach you through it, and we'll debrief on each step. And it was at the end of the year, which was convenient to hit his target, because he did a 120K deal. And, to go from just doing sort of 10Ks and then to go to like a 120K deal, it was, I couldn't have felt more proud.
And how were you able to get them on your side? Because the natural reaction when you become a manager is to kind of tell versus show or help or discuss.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm probably the opposite, Brian, actually. My default is to ask first. Okay, how did you get to that conclusion, or show me? And I had a manager at the time who was really helpful, actually, in that we had different management styles. And I think it's fantastic if you can be around and learn from people who are different from you. And I probably needed to do more telling, actually, in some circumstances. But I do think, to your original question there about getting people on side, as whether you're a sales manager or a sales rep, the trust element is so important. And especially now for sales leaders, we're often, some people may have been managing remotely anyway. For sales reps, I think, especially in I think Gartner's report said, 60% of a SaaS deal or a SaaS sales cycle, the buyer's done online. So you have to create that trust in that small amount of time that's left in the sales cycle. Yeah. And as a manager, obviously you have to get your people to do that and to build that trust. So being open, being proactive, kind of extending that hand first, I think is always a good way to get people to trust you.
And how about as far as hiring? Do you look for that curiosity?
Oh, hiring is I feel that's like a complete world of study in itself. I have been on a real journey with hiring because it's difficult, right? I mentioned earlier about how understanding people, whether it's, hiring someone to be on your sales team or whether you're going in to see a customer, trying to make that judgment in a small window of time is so difficult. It's really difficult to do. Very few people can, I think, judge that really well. And I'm definitely trying to learn more in that sense. But I definitely look for curiosity. I want to know, what have you learned? What do you do to expand and I don't just want to hear about, I've read this sales book, or, I think it's really important to be, people buy, this is the classic, people buy from people, right? They don't want to just know Jacqueline as a salesperson or Brian as they want to know, oh, great, Jacqueline's really interested in, ballet or science, or she cooks on the weekend, or she's been learning French in her spare time. Not all of that is true, by the way, but, they want people to be interesting, to be knowledgeable. So, so just keep learning.
Because that curiosity is kind of like the first step to empathy. You can't have empathy without curiosity.
Yes, no, I completely agree. And I think that's one of the things that really distinguishes salespeople, how well they can empathize, right, and how
it's hard to come up with great questions unless you're curious.
Exactly.
Why listen unless you're curious?
And people can tell, right, if you're genuine or if it is a rehearsed thing. That's right. What I was talking about. Rehearsing
keeps you up
helps.
At night? Some canned question.
I know.
And then their eyes dart off onto something else.
Yeah.
Cool. And what advice would you have for salespeople who are kind of in the B level right now to get to the A level?
So, I think about self-awareness is one. Really try and break it down. What are your strengths? What are your interests? What are your motivators? And make sure that you're aligned to the right type of company, the right industry, the right type of buyers,
Yeah.
so that you can really excel, because you'll shine your best if you put yourself in the best environment. And you'll enjoy it more. And people will, if you were to compare one person A with person B with a similar skill set, but one of them just seems to enjoy their job more, you'll probably buy from them.
Right.
So I would say go through that exercise. I did that before I just did my recent move to Oracle, and I'm extremely happy.
Cool. And where can people go to follow you and connect with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. That's my main go-to at the moment. I am going to look at Twitter as well, and also Clubhouse. I've seen you're on Clubhouse, Brian. So I need to join that club. But yeah, have a look at me on LinkedIn. It's just Jacqueline Ryan. I'm at Oracle, and I would be happy to get in touch.